spending your Sunday lunchtime here. I'm really grateful. My first time in this parish, it's wonderful. I loved Dr. David. It was a beautiful mass. So I'm really delighted to be here with you all. It's interesting to be invited to come and speak about issues such as abortion and euthanasia at a time like this, because we're in a position where abortion up until birth is legal right across Australia. And I have to say that Australia has some of the most extreme abortion laws throughout the world. Most countries don't allow the unfettered abortion access that we have here in Australia. This isn't us keeping up with the rest of the world. Actually, Australia is only one of a handful of countries that allow something so barbaric. Additionally, euthanasia here, euthanasia and assisted suicide across the country, everywhere except the Northern Territory. Again, this isn't something that's common throughout the world. There's maybe 12 to 15 countries that allow it. It's very, very rare. But here we are, we're in a state here in Australia where we have widespread acceptance of these and not really much questioning of it. And indeed here in New South Wales, we have the highest euthanasia rates across the country already, even after only a year of operation. While there are a handful of pro-life politicians still in state and federal parliament, in both of the major parties and some of the minor parties, we're quite some time away from having a good number of politicians around to overturn these bad laws. In one sense, that's not very good news, because unless we can get these laws repealed, not much is going to change. But on the other hand, it means that we have an opportunity ourselves to be defending life outside of every 3 or 4 years at the ballot box. There's more that we can do. The solution to the pro-life movement at this point is in our hands. So what do we do in the interim? How do we, as people of faith, as people who want to uphold the dignity and the sanctity of life, help change the culture, help infiltrate the culture, infiltrate, maybe a bit of both, with the pro-life message? And so this morning, what I thought I would do is try to offer just 5 principles of how we might approach this. So, here we go. So, 5 seeds of a culture of life is what I've called them, just because I like alliteration. And the first one I want to talk about is choice. And I'm going to start with a few stories. The first one happened about 11 years ago. It was February in 2014, and I remember this day like it was yesterday. It was 10 o'clock on a Wednesday night, and my phone rang. And it was a young man who I had taken to World Youth Day a few years before. And I'd been at the Archdiocese just 1 month. And he rang me and he said, "You write for the Catholic Weekly, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." And he said, "I was wondering if you could write a story about what's happening with my niece. She's 14 years old, she ran away from home, she's currently living in a women's shelter, and she's pregnant. But they've told her that if she decides to keep the child, then they're going to kick her out of the shelter because it's a women's shelter and not a family shelter. And so the abortion has been booked in for Friday. The doctors had booked in the abortion for her, and family's not allowed to see her." He said, "So I just wanted to write, I was hoping that you would write a story to say that here was my niece pressured into abortion when she really didn't want one." I said, "Okay, well, we can write the story if that's what you want, but let's see what we can do. If we've got sort of 24 to 36 hours, let's see what we can do." So I got in contact with some of the great pro-life centres around Sydney, asking what supports we might be able to find this young girl if she was indeed booted from this women's shelter. And I won't get into the details of everything that transpired over that next day, but the abortion got cancelled, the family was allowed to go in and see her. She ended up moving in with her grandparents and having the baby. And this is a few years old now. This is her. Born on the Feast of the Exaltation of the Holy Cross, which I thought was just very fitting. So that's my first story. Oh, and she's my goddaughter, by the way. The second story is actually about another one of my godchildren. So my friends Chris and Angela, again, they're pregnant with their second child, living in Canberra. They sent me a text message and said, "Look, we've had some really bad news about the baby. Can you just please pray? We're going in to see the doctor now. The doctor had said that the little baby boy that my friend Angela was carrying had a condition called hypoplastic left heart syndrome, which basically meant he was going to be born with half a heart. And they said, look, there's no hospital here in the ACT that can do anything about it, so you might be wanting to consider your options, but basically your only real option here in Canberra is abortion. And they said, well, that's not going to happen. So they drove up to Sydney to see a doctor at Westmead Hospital, and he said to them, there are 3 types of people who come to see me when they get a diagnosis like this. 1, they're pretty sure they want an abortion, they're just looking for a little bit more detail. 2, they don't know what they want and they're really looking for advice. Or 3, they're committed to having the child. So which one are you? And they said, there is nothing you can say that will make us terminate the life of our child. So we said, okay, great, let's get to work. And so they booked surgery. He was in for surgery within 24 hours of being born. In his 4 years of life, sorry, I'm going to show you a photo. In his 4 years of life, he spent maybe 12 months of that in hospital. But they said he would never walk, he would never talk, and he's doing both. Very, very slightly, but doing both. The third story I want to tell you is about a man who I don't know, but his name is Cyril Toos. But he could be any one of us or any one of our parents. In January of last year, 86-year-old Cyril was deemed eligible and approved for a stage 4 home care package, which is the highest level of aged care in a home that you can get, because he had high care needs. So the home care package would look after things like nursing care at home, toileting and showering, meals, cleaning, things like that. 10 months later, in November of last year, the only support that he had received was a little bit of cleaning support. He was on a waiting list for everything else. He had a nasty fall, got admitted to hospital, and was too scared to go home. So he applied for euthanasia, found 2 doctors to sign it off, and he was very clear, he didn't want euthanasia, he just felt like he had no other choice. Faced with going home to an empty house and trying to care for himself, he thought that ending his life was best. And so he died just a few weeks later. He's not alone. There are currently 70,000 like Cyril who have been approved to aged care packages, but are just waiting to get the support because of understaffing and under-resourcing. So why am I starting with these sad stories? Actually, only this one's sad, the other 2 are really happy. Those of us on the side of life are often described as anti-choice. The other side will say to us, you do what you like, but don't take my choices away from me. We can even fall into that trap ourselves, right? We often talk about ourselves as pro-life and people with a different worldview as being pro-choice. But think about the situations that we've just been talking about. My little goddaughter, the people at the pro-life movement, the people in those pregnancy centres, her family, those were the ones who were willing to provide that young woman with a choice. My little godson with the heart surgery. Were the hospitals in Canberra offering abortion really providing my friends with choice? No, they weren't. And then dear old Cyril, was he being offered choice? To the outside world, people like us would be labelled as anti-choice, and people pushing a culture of death would be labelled as pro-choice. But the opposite is true. What we've done is completely invert what choice is, and currently people don't seem to know the difference. So if that's the problem, then I think the solution is that we need to help people understand what real choice actually looks like. We need to reclaim the idea that we are actually those who are pro-choice. We're the pro-choice generation, not them. So how do we do this? Brings me to my next C, compassion. So if we're going to be people who provide real choice, then we need to be people of compassion. I'm sure you all know this, that the definition of compassion, the word compassion, actually means to suffer with somebody, to share in their sufferings. It's very different to how it's modern, the use in modern day, where the compassionate thing to do usually means to But when you hold up that false choice, that false idea of compassion next to authentic compassion and authentic choice, the difference is quite clear. So I've got another, sorry, I got that slide on the wrong way. So this is the Reserve Bank of Australia. They're good for things other than interest rates. This is their counterfeit detection guide. So this is what they put out in order to help people pick out dodgy banknotes. But what's interesting about its website, all of the training materials that you will see, is that at no point does the RBA show you a counterfeit note. It tells you, hold it up to the light, see if you can see this, tilt it, do this, do this, do this. Here are all the ways the RBA tells you to pick out an authentic note. And this is how they train people in banks and other places to pick out authentic notes. They say, we would think, I think commonly you think, well, if you're going to be trained to pick out counterfeit notes, then you should be looking at a whole bunch of counterfeits so you know what you're looking for. But that's not what they do. All they do is put the real thing in front of them all the time. Show them how. Show them what the real thing looks like. And then if they've got the real thing in front of them often enough, then it's quite easy for them to spot a fake. So I think there's something in this for us, right? In a culture where people don't know the difference between real choice and fake choice, where they don't know the difference between real compassion and false compassion, I think the call for us at this time is, instead of pointing to the counterfeits and telling people to be wary of them, we just keep showing them the real stuff until they can figure it out for themselves. So going back to the stories at the beginning. Those who were willing to walk the 14-year-old mum through her pregnancy and give her their time and resources and be compassionate to her were the ones who were offering her real choice. The hospital and the doctor who gave my friends options, the ones who walked with them for the past 5 years, looked after all the siblings while Matthew was in hospital, made donations while mum and dad both had to be off work, cooked meals, bought clothes and all of those things. This is what it means to be compassionate, to suffer with somebody. And thinking about Cyril's case, I don't know what happened there, but what if those of us who count ourselves as pro-life would have stepped up and said, you know what, Cyril? We'll find a way to provide you with the in-home care you need while you're on the waiting list until that support kicks in. We'll walk you through this part of your life so that you don't think that the only choice you have is euthanasia. I think if we did more of this, and this is all within our power, right, then we would be able to be presenting the real stuff in front of people all the time. We'll easily be able to pick out the faults. My next one is courage. And taking it, this is where I talk more about a little bit more about politics. Taking a pro-life position in this culture is courageous. And there are times when we do need to stand together against unjust laws that attack the dignity of life. Father David mentioned at the end of Mass that there's currently a bill before New South Wales Parliament that's looking to extend our abortion laws even further. So about 2 weeks ago, Greens member Amanda Conn tabled a bill that would make our abortion laws even more extreme than they are now. Abortion is already legal up until birth, right across New South Wales. But still, that's apparently not far enough for the pro-abortion lobby. What this bill would do, among other things, is it would require public health organisations, which includes Catholic hospitals, to provide abortions. So it would force Catholic hospitals to provide abortions. It would also force doctors and nurses who didn't want to participate to at least refer a woman to somebody who was willing. I think that's what Pope Francis calls hiring a hitman when he's describing it. So it removes the right of doctors to have nothing to do with abortion if that's what they want. It's actually quite counterproductive, to be honest, because most doctors who object to abortion would rather leave the profession altogether than to be referring people to abortionists. And so you end up losing care for pregnant mothers rather than adding to it. And so on this bill in particular, and ones like it as they come up, that attack the start or the end of life, we need to stand up and make our voices heard. And usually this is when I say, reach out to your local politicians and let them know that you want them to stand up for life and vote in favour of life. But I have to say, this parish is very, very blessed. So we're in Willoughby, and then you've got sort of Lane Cove and Davidson electorates sort of bordering the parish, and your representatives in Tim James, Matt Cross and Anthony Roberts are all good Catholic men who have a solid pro-life voting record. So it's worthy of giving them sort of a little bit of encouragement, of course, but you're actually really fortunate in this part of Sydney to have some wonderful men standing up. But we also need to stand together. So not just making individual representations to our politicians, but together. In a fortnight's time, the Day of the Unborn Child will again be held at St Mary's Cathedral. So there'll be a 10:30am Mass, a rosary procession to Parliament House, some speeches, and then back to the cathedral. It's always a really beautiful event, and even more important now that both human life and conscience are up for debate yet again at our Parliament. And it'd be nice, it's a Sunday, the politicians won't be there, but it would be nice for them to see a show of force coming out in favour of life. It's always a beautiful event, a time for us to come together and continue to raise our voices every year until these laws are repealed. Which brings me to my fourth C, commitment. The beautiful thing about the Day of the Unborn Child is it is an annual remembrance of the unborn lives and a public witness to the truth that life matters. And even if the laws have changed, and even if there are unfortunately something like 90,000 abortions a year in this country, that there is still a group of people who stand up every year and witness to the need to protect life. The laws may not change anytime soon, but it's important for us to keep coming together, keep raising our voices. And if we keep doing that, things can change. And I take inspiration from the March for Life in the United States. I'm sure many of you are aware of the March for Life, but it started back in 1974 with a woman named Nellie Gray. Nellie was a lawyer. She was 50 years old when the Roe versus Wade decision was handed down by the US Supreme Court, and that's the decision that legalised abortion right across the US overnight. And so Nellie thought, on the first anniversary of Roe versus Wade, I'm going to organise a march. Middle of winter, it's January in the United States, so it's the dead middle of winter, but she was going to organise this march. Like many other lawyers and other politicians and others at the time, she expected Congress would see the flaws in the Supreme Court's decision and pass a law to correct the error. She didn't expect the march to be an annual event. She thought it would be a one-time thing. But Congress didn't do anything that year, so she organised a second march and a third march. And every year she thought it would be the last. And numbers grew year on year, but they were nowhere near the 500,000 that currently attend. In 1995, 21 years after the March for Life had started, the official estimate was still only at 45,000 attendees. Now, I think about that 1995 march. Sorry, Miss Nellie. At that time, Nellie would have been 70 years old, and it had been more than 2 decades since she'd quit her legal career to devote herself full-time to the pro-life movement. She'd had no measurable or meaningful social, political or judicial progress, and if anything, things had gotten worse. Nellie and those fighting alongside her could have been forgiven for packing up at that point, for backing away from the pro-life cause and their pro-life efforts. No one could have blamed them or judged them. They put 20 solid years into it. But they didn't. They kept marching through the literal and figurative winter of the culture of death. They kept marching. Here's Nellie at the 31st March for Life, still there, still marching, still at the microphone rallying people together. She was 80 years old in that photo. She died in 2010, 12 years before the US Supreme Court finally handed down the decision in Dobbs and Jackson, which saw Roe versus Wade overturned. She never got to see the fruits of her efforts this side of heaven. It wasn't only a change in law, though, that the efforts saw. It was a change in culture. This is what the 2025 March for Life looked like. But if Nellie and others hadn't maintained their commitment and persevered through hostility and indifference from the public and the politicians and kept fighting, then the changes that we're starting to see in the US now, the changes in the law, the changes in the culture, would never have happened. My friends, maybe we will see a big pro-life victory in our lifetime, but probably we won't. We might just need to be content with the little ones, the one woman and one child, the one vulnerable elderly person helped at a time. We're not going to be gold medalists necessarily, but relay runners, just passing on the baton to a future generation that may see the fruit. But we need to stay committed, we need to stay steadfast and persevering, not worrying about rewards or success, except, again, Father Dan told me today, in the sure hope, the sure and certain hope that victory will come, and that a generation yet unborn will praise the Lord. Which brings me to my 5, confidence. We can be confident that if we keep standing up for life, if we keep giving people authentic choice, showing them authentic compassion, standing together courageously in public witness, if we maintain and persevere and stay committed, then things will change. Love will win in the end because the culture of death is inherently sterile. It has no children, it has no grandchildren. It's self-defeating. It produces no offspring, it leaves no progeny, no legacy. It itself will wither and die, and the culture of life will win, I promise you it will win. We will outlive, outbreed, outlove, outpray, outserve, outsmart, outvocation all of those who are against the culture of life. And I'm more confident of that today, standing here before you with the worst laws on the books in this country than have ever been anywhere. I'm more confident of that now. So I want to encourage you and ask you to keep going. Thank you very much.